Hi guys, welcome to the Reporters Roundtable, where we'll dive into the stories behind the stories as we sit down with a journalist who are shaping the narrative of Web3, blockchain, and the future of finance. So today we've got Gareth Jenkinson, managing editor at Cointelegraph. Gareth, you have a South African accent, right? But you're not based in South Africa. Where are you based at the moment?
Not anymore. I'm from South Africa, born and bred. I worked there as a journalist for like more than 10 years as a broadcaster, mainly on radio and television. But I live in the Netherlands now, nearly 3 years. But yeah, the South African accent is still thick.
Amazing to hear that. So we're gonna first start off by talking about your journey before you went into Web3, because I speak to a lot of journalists and managing editors, and it's kind of crazy how all of them sometimes didn't come from journalism at the very beginning. You did actually, so that's good. And you actually were covering sports. I could see that. I think you're an avid fan of rugby as well. So how did your career start in that? And then how did that transition to Web3 in general?
Look, it's a long story, so I'll keep it very short. I studied at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And I completed an honors degree in journalism. I went out and I started working at a community newspaper as my first job. I've always been passionate and like a big lover of sport, rugby in particular. I played at a fairly decent level in South Africa. And once I had my degree, I was kind of intent on getting into the industry and maybe becoming a sports journalist. But the first job I could get was at a community newspaper. So I did that for about a year. 6 months into that, I managed to get a slot as a weekend sports reporter at East Coast Radio, which is one of the biggest commercial radio stations in South Africa. If you ask South Africans if they've been to Durban, they know what East Coast Radio is. And that's kind of how I got started as a sports journalist. I moved on to becoming a full-time rugby writer for a very well-known newspaper in South Africa as well. And that really set me on my journey, becoming a full-on like sports journalist and broadcaster. Over the next few years, I shifted to a full-time job at East Coast Radio. I became like a main like primetime radio presenter and sports presenter. And at the same time, continued covering rugby mainly as a journalist. So writing newspaper stories and then eventually just online articles and doing loads of multimedia content for East Coast Radio. So obviously on radio, sports reports, and then lots of video content from, trainings, interviews with players, coaches, that kind of thing. How I fell into like covering Web3 was sort of by chance. In 2017, one of my friends who was also a rugby correspondent started looking for some freelance work online, and he found Cointelegraph, and they were looking for a few journalists. And he started writing for them. They were paying in Bitcoin at the time, so you would write an article and they would pay you a little bit of Bitcoin for your articles. And we met up for coffee the one day, and he was like, "Listen, what do you know about Bitcoin?" And it was 2017, and the drums were starting to beat about Bitcoin, and I think a lot more people were getting introduced to what it is. And he was like, "Look, they're looking for writers. Would you be interested in putting up your hand and writing some content about Bitcoin?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I know a little bit." I didn't know a lot back then, but I contacted the features editor, and they hired me, and I started writing freelance articles for Cointelegraph. And for about 4 or 5 years, I just did that as a side hustle. I'd write 2 to 3 features. It was everything from Bitcoin-related content to Ethereum-related articles, a lot of pop culture stuff. And then the more I wrote about the industry, the more I actually started jumping into the more technical side of things and covering a lot more of the actual, specifics and real like nitty gritty of the industry. Like fast forward quite a few years, I continued to work as a sports broadcaster. I eventually worked at SuperSport, which is South Africa's biggest sports broadcaster. And then like 3 years ago, my wife got an opportunity to work overseas, and we decided to, hey, let's pack up our bags and leave South Africa for a few years. And I started working full time for Cointelegraph, and here I am 3 years later. This year I became managing editor and sort of in charge of our multimedia approach and strategy. So it's a very, very broad job. But I'm loving it. I miss reporting on sport, but I really enjoy this industry as well. And yeah, man, it's like it's at breakneck speed all the time. And I would say to any journalist out there, if you don't know what Bitcoin is, go and educate yourself, because this is an industry that needs fantastic journalists, like smart people that are curious. And I genuinely believe in 10 years' time, it's going to be part and parcel of mainstream finance, and people like me and all of my peers that are doing really fantastic jobs will be working at Bloomberg and all sorts of, Financial Times, all sorts of other places. They'll want people with 5-10 years experience and knowledge covering crypto and blockchain news. So it's been a pretty crazy journey. I said it was going to be short, and I wasn't.
No, I can hear that. There's a lot of things that's really cool. I mean, when did the Cointelegraph stop paying journalists in Bitcoin? Because that must have
That
been
is a
great
good
for you.
question. I think it depends on the writer. My good friend Joe Hall, people know him as Joe Nakamoto. Like, he always insisted on being paid in Bitcoin until he left. So that was up until a year ago. But pretty much everyone else gets paid in stable coins. It's just easier to manage. And I'll be honest, I think after 2018, when the market crashed, after the first, like the 20K bull run, I wasn't even privy to what management was doing back then. I was just a freelancer, but they swapped from paying in Bitcoin to stable coins, and it just made a lot more sense, I think, financially, to be paying someone in a dollar-backed stable coin.
True. Well, it looks like Joe made a big bag there before he left, so that's great to hear. Like, I think we should be doing the same thing with our team as well. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things we unraveled there. What's interesting is that you came in as just a writer and you went up the ranks to managing editor. Can you tell us kind of like the journey around that? How does that usually work in a extremely big crypto outlet like Cointelegraph? And what enabled you to climb up the ranks that fast?
I think it really comes down to the organization. There's a handful of really great cryptocurrency publications that produce high standard quality journalism, and most of these outlets have very good, experienced journalists at the helm. And I think it's important to have someone who's worked as a journalist for at least a decade to be sort of leading the editorial department. From my personal side, like I explained to you, for about 5 years, I was just a freelancer. So I was contributing, from time to time, but not full time. Then when we moved to the Netherlands, I joined the team as a senior journalist on the European shift. So we have 3 shifts: a US shift, a European shift, and an APAC shift. And I did a lot of conferences and a lot of high profile interviews. And yeah, I just had more than a decade worth of experience. I did that for about 2.5 years, and the mandate was really to just produce high quality journalism and high profile interviews with the most important people in the industry. And early this year, we had some structural changes in our management. And I actually put up my hand and said, like, listen, I've got a wealth of experience here. I've got pretty good connections. And I think I might be a good fit to slot into this spot in upper management that had opened up. And my CEO took a chance on me. I wouldn't say took a chance on me, because I really do. I have the experience and the knowledge and the contact book to add a lot to the business. And I've got a wealth of experience as a multimedia journalist. And that's kind of how I sold it. So in my personal circumstance, I put my hand up and I said that I'm the person for the job. But I think in most publications, they'll try and identify high-performing journalists. You'll move up into a news editor role, and then you'll move up from there into higher management positions, whether that's managing editor, editor-in-chief, depending on the organizational structure. But it's usually just that is the progression. I think conventional journalism follows that progression. You start as a news journalist, you might become a specialist or an investigative journalist. If you have an aptitude for it, you'll become a news editor. And then you'll work your way up into upper management. And then it becomes a lot less producing content and a lot more managing people and setting the strategy and making sure everyone's doing their job. I still want to be creating content, so I'm a bit torn between the two, but for the most part, I'm really enjoying what I'm doing. And I think we're doing a pretty good job from a multimedia standpoint in producing some quality journalism and content. So yeah, that's how my journey kind of unfolded.
Yeah, so apologies for the noise, by the way. There's some cleaners cleaning the window. I live in a tower.
I can't hear anything,
Noisy, just
so
looking
we're all
right.
good.
But yeah, I mean, you mentioned multiple things there in terms of you being torn about creating content, but also, managing the team in general as well. I mean, you're very active. I can see that. Like, if you go into your social media and your LinkedIn, you're very active at interviewing people at specific conferences. I saw the ones at like Bitcoin Amsterdam. You know how to interview them. You've spoken to some of the biggest people in crypto, from Arthur Hayes to Luca Netz and so on, asking very specific questions. And at the same time as well, deep diving into your work, you did report on notable stories from Solana's genesis and evolution, the Bitcoin transaction, and the legal changes. Obviously, that was probably mostly during the bear market, and obviously the FTX collapse as well. So a lot of things that you were heads into when it came to these things in general. Now, I'm going to ask you specifically, so many things you've reported on have literally changed the landscape of crypto. A lot of the things that big outlets like, yourself, CoinDesk, The Lock, and so that whatever they report on does change significantly, the testimonial of how people react to crypto in general. And this is not only from like a perspective, from a consumer perspective, but also from a retail perspective in terms of like institutionals. So just basically based on that, just to understand what kind of stories do you really like working on, basically on everything that you've done in the past, and what kind of interviews were you most excited by? Because it seems like you've done so much coverage in this space already.
I've done a lot. I think that's the biggest challenge in this industry is there's so many different blockchain protocols and they do so many different things. And there are so many influential people in each of these parts of the ecosystem. Like if it's interviewing people from the Bitcoin ecosystem, you better know your stuff about Bitcoin, because you can't be asking stupid questions to Adam Back when, he invented the proof of work algorithm. So I particularly enjoy interviewing founders and protocol specialists just because they really know the subject matter, and any of the burning questions that you have, they will be able to answer and set the record straight. So I particularly enjoy doing those kind of interviews. I think for the most part, like I worked on radio for a long time, so I like to have conversations with people, and it's my forte is interviews. So for the most part, I like doing that. But I also just have a curious mind. If there's things that are happening in the industry that, leave a lot of questions unanswered, you want to be covering them. Like the whole FTX saga. I wish I was in the United States so I could have gone to the court case and actually picked up the phone and spoken to a lot of people. I live in Europe. I was living in South Africa at the time. It's very difficult to do your job when you're actually not there. Also from that standpoint, being on the ground, going to conferences and getting a chance to speak to people is also just hugely valuable. And once you meet people in person as a journalist, it opens that door. You get their contact details. I always try to build a good relationship with people. I'm not a gotcha journalist, I'm not one of those people. I mean, when you have to ask hard questions, you have to ask hard questions. It is what it is. It's part of the job. But for the most part, if I can get out and cover interesting stories and speak to the people that know the story or were behind the story, that's the stuff that I like to do. And it's so broad, Kim. Like there's so many different stories that I could talk about that I've covered. But I really love Bitcoin. I'm really interested in that. There's a lot of interesting stories that you can go into. One of the magazine articles I wrote 2 or 3 years ago was about the Satoshi pattern, which Sergio Lerner from Rootstock Labs basically uncovered. So he went and he did a lot of research into the early Bitcoin mining in the first year and looking at the way in which Satoshi hashed, identifying a pattern in that, and then identifying all the wallets that hold the Coinbase transaction. You could draw some inferences, and that's how we know how much Bitcoin Satoshi holds. And you can have a certain degree of certainty that specific wallets are the wallets of Satoshi, and if those coins move, someone knows that Satoshi is moving those wallets. So I spoke to Sergio like 3 or 4 years ago over email And Bitcoin Amsterdam this year was the first time I finally met him in person. And that for me was really great because I loved his work. I thought it was fascinating.
Wow.
And I finally got to speak to him, on video, like talking to him about his research. So that's the kind of stuff I enjoy doing. And it's also just about like time in the market. I mean, for traders, that matters. For journalists, it matters, like you will cover a story and then 5 years later, you will have been the person that covered that story firsthand. And it means that you have a whole load of knowledge that you just bank up over time. And then, you might in a few years' time have an opportunity to speak to someone you didn't back then. And then you can really just pick their brain. So, yeah, man, I love covering everything. I wish there was 36 hours in a day and I didn't need to sleep, because then you could just do a lot more.
That's a fair point. That sounds really exciting, by the way. I'm really happy you're able to meet him, and you must have loads of questions to ask him at that point. Can you tell me, from your perspective, how does media impact overall the crypto space in terms of the consumers in general, the token price, and so on as well? Do you feel that some of the stories, some of the investigations that you report on have a very, very big impact on those elements, especially since you're obviously reporting a lot, for example, on Solana's journey, the performance optimization around the blockchain, time tracking technology, and so on. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it's probably one of the biggest responsibilities that all of the big crypto outlets have is producing quality journalism that reports facts. Everyone makes mistakes as well, so I'm just going to put that out there. Cointelegraph's made mistakes in the past, all the other publications have. And when you do, you can have a big impact on the market. The same thing goes with the kind of angles that you take in stories. If you don't like Solana and you constantly report about their outages, your audience is constantly getting a negative perception of this blockchain, which might not be a representation of the actual truth. So that is why it's important to have people that know what they're doing, that are fairly objective. I think the nature of life is subjective, and journalists want to be objective, but everything's subjective. So there's always subjectivity, but as long as you're giving both sides of the story and painting a picture that allows the reader to understand generally what the truth is, then you're doing a good job. And yes, we have a very big impact in the industry overall, and the things you write can move price, they can change perception and sentiment. You have a huge impact. And yeah, people are very reactive in the industry. If you write something about one of the founders or something, they read it, and they will be unhappy with you if you haven't done a good job, or at least done it in a way that that has tact and is accurate. So yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I think it's the biggest challenge, is making sure that you're doing a good job, and not making mistakes, because you can move price massively. And I mean, that has a huge economic impact across the industry. I mean, one article, we had it happen last year. One article can wipe out $100 million of short or long positions if you write something that's not accurate or not true. That's a scary thought, and
that's crazy.
It won't be malicious or anything. Someone might just make a mistake and you cost thousands of investors millions of dollars. So it's a big responsibility.
It is. And obviously, your preferences at the moment, I can see, and especially with Cointelegraph, you guys like reporting on when it comes to institutional news, but also news that led specifically in technology with infrastructure, especially layer 1, layer 2s and DeFi protocols and so on as well. But there's one big narrative right now, which is, pretty controversial, which is meme coins, for example. And again, media does drive the impact of the price of these meme coins. What's your views on meme coins in general? How does a big, media outlet like Cointelegraph filter out those type of stories? Because again, they're exciting, but some of them are BS, and some of them actually come from BS, but do actually become very impactful as well. So how do you guys filter those stories out, especially with such a difficult topic as memes?
It's a hard question. My personal opinion about meme coins, they're part and parcel of the industry now. I think that it's a bit of a casino, and it's like you luck out, and it really comes down to the size of the community and how many people are making noise about it on various social media platforms, and that really drives the price. there's a few individuals that'll hold a huge amount of coins and they actually have the big sway in what happens. From a reporting standpoint, we try to keep it factual. If we are doing some market reports on that, we'll tell you how the token is moving and do some technical analysis and give you that. But over and above that, I think anything else that you're reading into it is purely subjective, and no one really knows. I'm going to be honest with you. I watch a lot of the KOLs out there and a lot of the traders, and I see the stuff they're saying, and a lot of it is just sentiment, and that's my opinion. But from a reporting standpoint, the Goatius Maximus meme coin. Sorry about my cat in the background. The Goatius Maximus meme coin and Truth Terminal pumping that is a general human interest story that's fascinating. An AI powered or controlled X account went and pumped this token. It shared loads of content about the token and it helped its price rise, and now it's one of the biggest pump.fun meme coins by market cap ever. We're going to cover that because it's interesting. A lot of people in the industry are interested in it and they want to understand the genesis story. So I think we have a duty to tell you what it is and why it's popular. But in terms of price and everything else, we're not interested in that. We'll tell you what the technical analysis says, and that's about as far as it goes. But it's part of the industry. We often run stories quoting notable industry experts saying X, Y, Z about meme coins and what they think. I think it's important to tell you what the most influential people in the industry think about them. And if they have some important alpha to give you, for sure, we'll do that. But we're not about pumping anyone's bags or anything. We try to avoid that. And yeah, my opinion is it's a casino.
Yeah, I've always had that just to that curiosity in general, reading about all the outlets reporting on meme coins in general, because it's such a controversial topic. Going back to companies and people that obviously want to get featured in Cointelegraph, the biggest thing for most people is they don't really understand what real news is and what editorial coverage is. They think that if it's news for them, it's news for you guys in general. So can you tell us kind of from that perspective, what really matters to you when it comes to three types of announcements? And if it's interesting for you guys in general, most of the things that happen in this industry are partnerships. What partnerships are interesting for you guys? Second question is, are integrations interesting for you guys? Web 2, Web 3 integrations, Web 3 integrations within them. And finally, again, a common trend in terms of news announcements are new hires, for example. These are three things that constantly come up. There are specific columns down these outlets that feature them, but some people think they should be a full-on story. So as the managing editor, can you specifically give us guys insights on what really matters and what you guys deem as editorial stories?
Yeah, for sure. I think so you said partnerships, integrations, and new hires. So in terms of partnerships, it really comes down to the caliber and the size of the entities that you're talking about. So if Consensus makes a big partnership with I don't know, some other big wallet or infrastructure provider, it's Consensus. They're really well known. They're the biggest sort of software developer in the Ethereum ecosystem. We should probably know about who they're partnering with and why it would be interesting for the ecosystem and have impact. So I think it does. It comes down to the entities involved and the potential impact that it has on the industry and why it's important. If you can answer that and honestly tell me that it's going to have a very big impact, then the chances are our team will run a story on that. And I think that's the general rule of thumb. It's really hard for newcomers though, because, when Solana was young, they were sending us loads of stuff and lots of integrations were happening. And we probably just said no to a lot of things. And, 2 years later, it's the biggest stuff, it's like whatever, Soulflare or, really, really big news items that we probably should have covered. And hindsight will always do that, but you're going to miss some stuff just because they might not be well-known names now, but over time they get a lot of traction. In terms of integrations, I think was the second one. Again, how important the integration is and what its potential impact is. It's really about unpacking that and putting that forward. This is the integration. This is who is connecting to what. And this is how much capital it will unlock. This is how many users it will reach. If you can really just get that across, why this is impactful and why this is important, then a publication is likely to cover it. And like, it's the same thing goes for us. If we're writing a news story, you have to ask your writers, like, why does the reader care about this? And if they can't tell you, then why are we writing a story about it? That's what it comes down to. And then the last one was like new hires. I think this one is quite a subjective thing. Obviously, a good example here is like Ledger onboarded the guy that designed the iPhone. That of course you're going to write a story about that because
what's his name again?
Yeah, he's, as far as I remember, the story is he's part of their board now. You know,
wow.
And he helped design the newest Ledger. That's a cool story. The guy who designed the iPhone, one of the most sort of widely used pieces of hardware and technology that everyone knows about, is now working in Web3, helping design one of the leading brands' hardware wallets. It's an easy sort of higher story to cover. I think similarly, any of the big exchanges, if they bring on board someone from Web2 or from a particularly big privacy background, something like that, Chainalysis hiring Chief Jim Lee, who was the former head of the IRS. I met him in Amsterdam a couple of years ago and interviewed him. That's an interesting story. You know, someone who's literally worked for the IRS in the US for 2 decades is now working for Chainalysis, the biggest sort of, you know, blockchain surveillance, whatever you want to call it, you know, blockchain analysis software developers. Like, that's a great story. We'll look at that. It comes down to that, right? Like high caliber people, well-known people coming into the Web3 industry, we're likely to cover those stories. And yeah, I guess people are moving between the two, but the overarching theme here for me is like, it needs to be impactful, and you need to tell me why it's an interesting story and why it matters. And if it's compelling enough, a publication's going to cover it. But like, you know, a $5 to $10 million raise, something like that. I'm sorry, lots of people pour $5 to $10 million into things. Like, you know, our general, not that we have a set threshold, but we kind of look to cover stories that are like more than $10 million fundraisers or more, and then obviously upwards. But that's not to say that something that's a $1 to $5 million raise for someone who's developing a really new integration for the Lightning Network that's going to like take Bitcoin payments to the next level and keep it completely self-custodial. We're going to cover that story because it's very, very important for the Bitcoin community in general. So that's an example where the price doesn't matter, the impact of the story matters. So like, it's completely subjective. Most of the time I get sent stuff. If I don't have enough time, I'll send it to my news editor and be like, please just look at this. If you think it's worth it, give it to a writer, let them reach out to the team. And then I think the other thing is, companies need to understand that publications want exclusivity and they want original comment. So if you send out a press release, like, make the founder available, make the technologist available, make the partners available, you know. It makes it a lot easier for us to do our jobs. And we don't want to write exactly the same story that CoinDesk wrote or Decrypt wrote, you know. We want our own line. We want to take our own angle. And if I speak to the founder, I can have a conversation with him and ask him the questions I want to ask. And I'm going to ask completely different questions to what Michael Casey, you know, the former editor of CoinDesk, would ask. Like, that's just how it goes. So if you make these people available, it goes a long way in helping you get, you know, your press releases out there and get coverage for your clients. And I've answered that in a really long way, but I think it helps a lot that people understand the way in which publications go about vetting the content that they're getting, because we get a lot of press releases, like more than you want to know.
Yeah, this is why we have these conversations and this pod in general, is just to like really create transparency upon this, to not only let people know in general, but also, you know, let people educate themselves on what really matters to you guys. There's one thing also I wanted to add in, which again, you know, you can tell me also why does this matter, but it's something that I've seen that's very controversial as well, especially with like DeFi protocols and aggregators, how much TVL they've done, how much volume they've done. You know, some volumes I've seen with like certain DEXs are just insane one day, like $400 to $500 million in general. is this newsworthy in general as well? Because these are very large volumes, which indicates a lot of retail use and therefore a lot of people being bullish about using a specific, but being in a specific sector of crypto. Again, something controversial because I get this a lot as well. I see this a lot, and sometimes people pick it up, sometimes people don't pick it up. So, what is the main reason around that? Those numbers, those volume numbers.
Yeah, the easiest way to answer this is TVL indicates how much trading is going on in a particular protocol, but it's notoriously difficult to track. And you can just do a load of wash trading and pump up your TVL like crazy, like set up a couple of bots that just trade in between each other. You absorb the losses that are made between these trades, but you can completely inflate the value of TVL. So we get plenty of press releases where a specific DeFi aggregator or something like that will tell us, hey, we've got crazy TVL. You should write a story on this. Okay, cool. Give me the on-chain data. Show me who's trading. You might not be able to tell me who the traders are, but I want a certain level of certainty that it's not just inflated values and you're not, artificially doing this. A lot of that comes down to your journalists as well. If you have a good on-chain investigator that can go and do the work and actually figure out what is right and what is wrong, and what is truthful. I remember interviewing CZ back in 2018, about a year after Binance had been built. And they went very quickly from the whole Binance to the largest exchange by volume. And the reason this happened was Binance at the time didn't have fiat trading. You couldn't trade fiat currencies. You could only trade crypto. So you would deposit crypto into a Binance wallet and then you can trade on the platform. And if you use BNB, you would get next to no fees or no fees on your trading if you had a certain threshold. So they very quickly attracted a huge amount of capital and their TVL just skyrocketed. And lots of people were saying no, this is BS. Binance are, they're inflating their TVL and, they're using bots to do this. And I asked CZ the question. He was like, look, we don't inflate the volume and we're not even giving you the total volume. We're just giving you one side of the volume. So we could make this look double as good if we reported it in the way that other people are doing it. But it's a narrative that will always be put out there as a new protocol or something or marketplace comes up and they just spew hey, our TVL is XYZ. And it's cool, well done. But we need to check and verify what this is in order to know if it's actually newsworthy. And everyone tells us what the TVL is. So I don't think it's the most important metric anymore. And if you feel like people aren't taking your stories because you're throwing TVLs at them, maybe that's why. So I hope that answers the question.
That answers the question. Well, anyone that from now on, anyone that pitches TVL, make sure that you guys show your on-chain data.
Yeah,
make sure you get that data from DeFi Llama and show that makes sense. In terms of also that people are wondering how internally a big media outlet works as well, because I think there's something curious about a lot of people that maybe sometimes pitch to you guys and then wait for ages to get a response and everything. How does it work internally? You mentioned that someone sends you a story, you say, this is interesting. You send it to the news editor. News editor then appoints a specific journalist to it, or do they send it out to see who wants to pick it up, or do they know already what profile is perfect for this? How does that work in general? Because I know that with different outlets it's different, but I think with the big outlets like you guys, like CoinDesk, the Block and so on, it's very similar as well. So you can please take us through the internal process for people to understand that furthermore.
Yeah, I think most PR companies, all of their, different, what do you call them, account managers will have all the different journalist emails. So they'll fire out an email and everyone gets the email. Someone's either going to, in the way we work in Slack, someone's going to pitch this story. Hey, these guys sent this email. They're telling us that this is what's happening. Are we interested in covering it? Or I get the email and then I forward it to the news editor. The news editor looks at it and then puts it out to the news team. This news is happening. Who can pick this up? If they want a specific person to do it, they'll assign it to that person. But yes, it's very much read the headline. If you have time to read the whole email, read through it, make a judgment call on whether you think it's newsworthy, assign it to a writer. And the way we do it is we really are pushing hard to not just rewrite a press release. It's like I said to you, okay, go back and reach out, speak to the team, get an interview, today, send some questions if you can, whatever's the easiest way to get it done, to get some original angle on the story. Don't just rewrite what they've written. Figure out the most important part of the story, dial in on this, cover the news, and then tell our readership why it's relevant in the greater context of everything that's happening in the news cycle. And that's generally the approach. So yes, various people of our team will receive the story. They'll make a judgment call on whether we want to cover the story, and then we'll go about covering it in the way that we want to cover it. And unfortunately for many companies, they'll complain at you and be like, why did you cover the story like that? Or why did you take this angle? And you just have to understand, news organizations, first and foremost, want to maintain their independence. They're not going to do what you want them to do. They're going to decide on what the story is. And, that's up to the PR teams to manage their clients' expectations. But like, the reality of the world is don't expect media outlets to write the angles and the narratives that you want. They know what's newsworthy, they know what's in the news cycle, and they're going to cover it accordingly.
That makes sense. And also, I do believe that when you guys do hire journalists from your end as well, do you guys already know what specific niche interests everyone has? So from that perspective, sometimes, do you guys already know, if you guys are weaving a specific story, that this person would be perfect for that, so let's put that person on? And how does that work in general? Because like, from that perspective, does that person become like a specific KOL in this space as well, like a journalist / KOL, because they're very, very technical about these things? How does that work when you guys do hire journalists and classify them in general?
Look, we don't necessarily hire protocol specialists or beat reporters. Joe Hall, who was with us, was just like, he's only interested in Bitcoin. He was a Bitcoin maxi, but he's a journalist. So he wouldn't, at first he did. And then, after a few months, he was just like, I'm only going to write about Bitcoin. And management at the time then was happy with that. And it's great to have a beat reporter. And that's how conventional newspapers work. When I was a sports journalist, I was a rugby beat reporter, and I know rugby backwards. I knew all the players. That was my beat, and I covered rugby. Can I cover other things? Yes. And from time to time I did, but that's how it worked. With Cointelegraph, we mostly have generalist reporters. So everyone can pretty much cover everything. But you do, over time, end up covering specific things. Like, I can tell you, before I became managing editor, like the last year and a half, I wrote a lot of news about ZK rollups and Ethereum. And all the stories kind of just fell into my lap, because it was like, hey, you're the ZK guy. You know what the technology is, and you're building up an expertise here. And that's just kind of how it works. So it does happen over time. Our team specifically, no, we don't quite have beat reporters. Everyone does everything, but it does sort of move in that way, that like, we trust someone to cover a certain industry or angle. I think other publications maybe have the luxury of having some beat reporters that are a bit more specific. When NFTs were hot, they would have like an NFT specialist. DeFi, DeFi is still going pretty hot, and we have a writer that does our DeFi newsletter. But he writes a whole load of other news, but he knows his DeFi shit, so he's going to be the guy that we assign this stuff to. So yes, I think if everyone had an infinite amount of budget, they would hire a beat reporter for every sector of the industry. But how many sectors do we have, man? Like, you'd have a Bitcoin reporter, you'd have an Ethereum reporter, a Solana reporter, an XRP reporter, a DeFi reporter, meme coin reporter, NFT reporter, like the list goes on. It would be endless. There would just be too many things to cover. So you do need generalists, and I think most people over time get a pretty good knowledge. But we publish so much stories, I can't read everything, and that's why you have a news editor and people to do the different things and keep track and keep tabs on all the different stuff that's happening.
And talking about the different stuff that's happening at the moment, what are the key trends and development in the next year or so in crypto are you excited about?
That's a good question. I thought that AI was a pretty big narrative, but I feel like that's falling away a little bit. I honestly think going into 2025, Bitcoin is just going to be front and center of everything, just what's happening in the United States. With Senator Lummis really pushing hard for this Bitcoin bill, and Donald Trump kind of really pledging his support for the industry. I think if the Bitcoin bill does gain traction and actually happens in the United States, then next year is Bitcoin summer. Like, it's going to be front and center. You might see a lot
100%.
more ecosystem development. Maybe there'll be a big drive to really drive Lightning adoption or some other sort of Bitcoin layer 2s. I hate to say that because I think there's a lot of affinity like marketing going on in the Bitcoin ecosystem, and there's only a handful of people that are creating Bitcoin layer 2 protocols that allow people to maintain custody of their Bitcoin and use their Bitcoin in a way, like at the end of the day, you never give up custody of your Bitcoin, but you can use it in a much faster way than the protocol currently runs and is designed. If you do things natively on Bitcoin, it's going to take a long time for your transaction to be processed, and it might be a fairly high fee. But if you use something like Lightning and some of the other stuff that's coming, you maintain the ownership of your Bitcoin, but you can transact very quickly with other people. So I would say next year, I think is Bitcoin's going to be a huge narrative, and meme coins will continue to be part of like the mind share because they've captured so much value. And it's just a huge speculative market at the moment, and there's a lot of money to be made. So people want to know what's happening there. I think Sui and Aptos have thrown a spanner in the works in terms of new layer 1s. So people that are looking for everything, altcoins outside of what Bitcoin is doing, the race between Ethereum, Solana, Sui, Aptos, Nia, there's a Cardano, there's a few other layer 1 protocols that are really just vying for a lot of users. And I think it's who makes the development environment the easiest to attract new devs and new users and offers great scale, speed, and cost. They're going to win the race, but I don't think it's a winner captures all environment. So like those 4 or 5 narratives, I think will be really big next year.
Awesome. Sorry, there's a bit of a lag there at the end.
That's all right.
But yeah, no, that sounds correct. That's something that we're looking at as well in terms of upcoming trends and what we've seen in the market. AI/Deepin is going down, but there are still new developments happening next year that are very exciting. And in the meme coin space as well, I just see more and more degen products happening and being built. A lot of volume being pushed onto them in general, so this is great. I mean, this is like we're going towards the end of the interview here. There's one thing I want to ask as well, because a lot of people have come to see me for this, but is there like any advice that we'd like to give to any aspiring journalists that want to break into Web3 and blockchain reporting in general? Because it is a very big market and a lot of people are transitioning like you did at the very beginning to this new sector. So what are some of the advice that you can give to people that are looking to jump into this?
I think the biggest hurdle is gaining a decent amount of like foundational knowledge on the industry. I think you really need to understand the value proposition of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin works first and foremost. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, but I think it's a very good starting point. If you understand what Bitcoin is and why it was created and how it operates and why it has tangible value, then you understand the reason for this industry. And then you can start to think about all the applications that come with Ethereum and all the other smart contract protocols and how the industry has expanded since. So you need to find good resources and develop some knowledge. I was lucky to come in at a time where if you had a fairly base knowledge, you could start writing about the industry. But now, I mean, Cointelegraph, we're actively looking for high quality journalists. The challenge is you either have degens or cryptocurrency enthusiasts that have no journalistic training, so they might not necessarily be good writers. Or you have journalists that are really great journalists and they have a good track record, but they know nothing about Web3. So you have to kind of try and find a middle ground, and then we're all ending up fighting over a pool of really great journalists that know about Web3. So I would just say, like if you are a journalist and you're in your first 5 to 10 years of your career, start, even if you just start self-publishing on a Medium blog or something like that, look into really big narratives, look at the news cycle, reach out to some people. If you can, interview some people, write some quality news articles, self-publish it. If you're willing and able to do some multimedia content, do that as well. But throw yourself into it. Try and get a portfolio of articles going. that showcases that you're a great writer and you know about the industry, and then slowly but surely someone's going to pick you up. It's very difficult though, and like we sift through lots of CVs, and all respect to all of the people out there that are hustling hard and looking to cover this industry. There's some great writers, and there's some not so great writers, and those people we will look past, unfortunately. We need people with really good experience, that are good journalists, that also have good knowledge of Web3, and it's really hard to find. I think a good transition would be PR professionals that have worked for various industry players at PR companies would be a good transition if they want to become journalists, and you would enjoy it more than just doing PR, because PR, you're working for a client, whereas in journalism, you're just telling stories. So you're not really beholden to anyone, and you go with the news cycle. So it's a lot more exciting. But yeah, gain some knowledge, write, create content, rinse and repeat, put your name out there, put your feelers out. And like every shot you don't take is never going to score, right? So like shoot your shot. Like if you want to send me a DM on LinkedIn or X, go for it. They're open. I'll read your message. I'll give you honest feedback. I'll point you in the right direction if I think it works. I always have an open door policy with that kind of stuff. But yeah, people need to understand that it's not so easy anymore to just get into this industry, and you really need to know what you're doing and be a good writer or journalist or content creator to crack it at a big publication.
Amazing, and that's really good advice for most people. It's good that you say that a bunch of PR professionals to switch to journalism. I mean, it doesn't make sense. They know the industry inside out. They're hustling all the time.
And they know how to write. I mean, you're writing copy that is kind of promotional. Yeah. But at the end of the day, you're giving me, if you give me the 5 W's really well, I'm probably gonna cover the story that you've pitched me. So yeah, they definitely have a step above everyone else.
Yeah. That's good to know. And again, the interview is about to be done, in terms of like everything you gathered today is the information you've given us is so much alpha, especially for anyone that's aspiring to be a journalist, people that also want to send stories to Cointelegraph. I think they kind of understood now certain key factors that you're looking for. So do appreciate your time. Before we go, where are you going to be in the next upcoming months? You mentioned that you're always liking to go into these conferences. You like to travel the world to see everyone. So where can we find you in the next upcoming months in 2025?
I'm going home to South Africa in December, so I will be taking a couple of weeks off and spending some time with family, but January is going to be pretty busy. I have a press accreditation to cover the World Economic Forum, so we're looking at the details of that. I've been 2 years ago, but I didn't have the accreditation. My editor-in-chief at the time did. So I just covered Davos in town, which was still equally interesting and really fun. But yeah, this time around, I actually have a pass for the forum. So if we go and cover that, I will be there. Otherwise, I'll be in Miami for WAGME. Cointelegraph is partnering with WAGME to host that event in Miami. So yeah, if you're in Miami in end of January, I think 60% likelihood that I'll be there. And then the rest of the year, just keep an eye out on my social media. I'll probably do Paris Blockchain Week, definitely Bitcoin Amsterdam again, probably Token 2049 in both Dubai and Singapore. There's a handful of other conferences that I'd really like to get to. Web Summit next year. Yeah, I mean that's where the magic happens. You get to do all the in-person interviews and stuff. So yeah, just look out for me next year. I'll be around.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Gareth. I do appreciate everything you've given us. And if you guys want to reach out to Gareth, Gareth can give you some of your socials, maybe your Twitter and your LinkedIn.
Yeah, on X, I'm Gaza_Jenks. You can find me there. Otherwise, Gareth Jenkinson on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm on Instagram as well. I've got a fairly new YouTube channel that I'm trying to just create some other type of, crypto and blockchain related content on the side. Gareth Jenkinson, you can find that there as well. But primarily, if you send me a DM on X, I will do my best to get back to you.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much for your time today, Gareth. I know you're a very busy man, so we're going to let you go. And
I enjoyed the conversation.
Amazing. Well, you guys will find everything on the Reporters Roundtable on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much again.